This is the Texas Real Estate Podcast, episode number 3.
I'm okay with walking away, right? I'm an investor. I'm looking at this as an investment property. If I don't get it, I live tomorrow, I go look for another house, right? So I can push a little bit harder, I think, on my side and not worry too much about losing the deal.
You're listening to the Texas Real Estate Podcast. If you're looking to build cash flow, break free of the 9-to-5, and take control of your financial future, you are in the right place.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Texas Real Estate Podcast. My name is Matt Williams. My co-host is Jeff Bateman.
Jeff Bateman here.
Today, we're going to do a little bit of a different type of episode. Instead of having a guest on, we're going to respond to some of the feedback that we got from people from a couple of the first episodes that we created. One of the questions people have is, how do you price a deal? What are the best ways to walk through stepping into real estate if you want to go get something on the MLS, jump right into it, and start making moves towards becoming an investor?
All right, perfect. So I think the most important thing you have to do before you decide you want to do anything whatsoever is make sure you have your own house in line. Make sure your finances are all good, in order. It doesn't do any good to go in this process and start credit card debt anyway. So make sure your house is in line. Secure your financing. Make sure that you go and get pre-approved for a loan. Find an agent who has investment properties themselves is very important. Figure out what price range you want. Find out how much you want to spend, where you want to live, where you want to not live, but where you want to have a house at. That's important to find these kind of things out. One of the things I do is I look every single day. Every day I'm going to look, I'm going to search different areas, different prices. And I just always want to be aware of it. And I'll even practice looking at deals. So I'll look daily and I'll analyze deals that even I'm not going to buy just so I get familiar with it. Analyzing is, we'll go over that, but that's strictly just figuring out how much your payment's going to be versus how much rent you're going to get in. The old revenue minus expenses equals profit. Way oversimplified, but we'll get into that. Once you find the house, what do you do next? You make an offer on the house. Once the offer is out there, the offer is accepted. What happens after that? You get an inspection. You got some days. You go through, you negotiate, you settle the deal. It's all done. It's all settled. It's figured out. Get in touch with your insurance agent. Contact them. Let them know what's going on. You go through the underwriting process. That's really super fast. No, it's not. But for this purpose, it's going to be really fast because I'm going to go right through it again. So you go through the underwriting process, which is basically the bank going through and approving you and getting a bunch of information from you. You close on the house. You list the house. You get applications. You verify those applications. You give people the keys. All that in like 3 minutes. This is super easy.
These are the 16 easy steps in buying a house.
Come on, it's like a 2-minute drill. What are you talking about? That's how easy it is.
That's why everyone does it, because it's so easy.
It flows downhill, right? So once you get the first one done, everything else just speeds up and goes.
100% of the time. There's a number of steps to getting a house. There are ups, there are downs, but the most important thing is consistent process. If you develop a rubric, if you say, okay, here's what my funnel looks like. In order to get a deal, I'm going to work up through the steps. And each one of those steps, I'm just going to put in reps. If I'm going to put in reps in terms of buying, I need to put in reps in terms of finding, processing the deal, looking at the details. I need to put in reps in terms of walking properties. I need to put in reps in terms of looking at different neighborhoods, looking at different crime rates, whatever it might be, and break those pieces down and just keep putting in the reps. Then when you're making the decision, it will become so old hat that you'll know exactly what you're buying.
Yeah, it's like the old telltale. You practice, right? That's basically what it is. You practice. You pull up numbers and you play with numbers until you feel comfortable. You eventually have to pull the trigger, though. There is something to be said about analyzing 317 properties. That's too many. You want to go through. Eventually, you got to pull the trigger. And a lot of the first steps, as far as making sure your house is in order. It's kind of a common sense thing, but it's not. You're not going to get into this. We're not. Neither one of us got in this to get rich fast, right? We're getting into this for the long term. It's investing. We're investing in it. There's going to be time invested, and so you want to make sure that the money you're using is something that you have saved up to use or you can afford to lose. So that's the main part about getting your house in line. That's not a step that you have to do every single time, right? It's something that happens one time. Once you're in that place, you can continue on. Same thing, I think, with reaching out and finding a broker or a lender. Once you go through that process at the beginning, you get more familiar with it and comfortable with it, so you can continue on with it. So I think that part is also something that's, although it's a step, these steps aren't done every single time you buy a new house, but they have to be done at the beginning to get started.
Absolutely. To that point, when you're looking to find a lender, which is step number 2, the best way to do it is to talk to more than one person, right? At a minimum, target 3. You want to have a pre-qualification letter, so you want to be primed and ready to go. So when you have the house that you want to buy directly in front of you, you're able to pull the trigger without jumping through a bunch of hoops or finding out that you don't qualify or that the rate isn't where you want it to be or whatever the situation might be. As a general rule, it might be good to talk to one mortgage broker. A mortgage broker is different than a bank. They work with a number of different lending institutions, and so they can get pricing that sometimes can be better or more diverse, or depending on your credit scenario, they can work with different backgrounds to find a deal that works for you. It's also worth checking in with your bank. If you bank with a major lending bank, Wells Fargo, Chase, whatever it might be, you can walk into the office and they'll have somebody there that's ready to price a deal with you. Often those deals are really good. Often they're what you need, but it's still worth pricing at least 2 or 3 people and making sure you're getting the right deal.
And I think the pre-approval process and even just having that letter from somebody makes you more appealing to a buyer. Just like if you're buying a primary residence, the buyer wants to know that you're serious. They wants to know that you're prepared to buy the house and you have the ability to do so. The next thing I did was find a real estate agent who's also an investor. And I think that's big. I think it's big because they've been where you want to go. And just like the NFL, who is a copycat league, copycat in real estate is perfectly fine. It is recommended. Follow someone who's been there. Follow somebody who's done the exact same thing you want to do and ask for guidance. By being an investor real estate agent, they understand it's a little bit different and they understand what you're doing and they can walk you through some scenarios that happen later on. So I think it's, you might have a friend or a family member that's a real estate agent. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just would recommend using somebody who has done this before.
And Jeff, how would I find somebody that's going to be a good investor-friendly real estate agent who's also an investor? How would I go about finding that person?
I'm part of several Facebook groups. There's several, North Houston Facebook real estate, Woodlands real estate. There's several places out there, and there's a lot of agents. There's meetups you can go to. I met mine through Bigger Pockets. I was just sitting around one day. My daughter was in the hospital, and I'd been listening to Bigger Pockets broadcasts, and I went on the forums and just posted, "Hey, I'm new from the Woodlands, blah blah blah. I'm Jeff," and I had 2 people reach out to me to say, "Hey, welcome. I know somebody that lives in your neighborhood, and maybe they reach out to you, and here's their number." And I called them, and we went and ate lunch, and the beginning. I mean, it was as simple as that. It may not always work out that way, but I think you can find agents out there. Or how many real estate agents are out around? You can just ask, do you have rental properties? There's a lot of things you can do. You can call a broker or a Remax and say, "Hey, do you have any real estate agents that specialize in investment properties?" And that's another way you could do it.
And if you're in the North Houston area, you can reach out to Jeff like I did.
Yeah, exactly.
Get connected with somebody that's really good, that's provided a lot of value.
That's all you do. Network. Once you got a real estate agent, you kind of have to know what kind of house you're looking for. Are you looking for a $150,000 house? Are you looking for a $250,000 house? What kind of neighborhood do you want to live in, or do you want to have a house in? You look at school districts. And what I kind of did at the beginning, and this is obviously just what I did, I think it's what Matthew did also, is that we kind of stayed where we live. We felt kind of comfortable in the area. I'd lived here for 16 years, so I was very familiar with it. And so I just kind of identified several places that I wouldn't mind having a house. I looked every day. I looked for houses. I had the real estate agent set me up on an email blast so that certain zip codes that I had chosen or we had chosen, because he helped me out, I'd get emails every day telling me what they are. And at the beginning, I printed them out. I drove all of them. I thought he was telling me these are great ones. I was coming from him. I thought these were emails, him telling me, "Hey, these are ones you should look at. These are done deals." And so I just went and looked at all of them, and I'd call him and say, "I like this one, that one." And he's like, "Oh no, those are just everyone that pops up." Oh. So I was looking at all of them, but it was fun. I drove around different neighborhoods, and I kind of used that to, the next step of analyzing the deals. I drove around daily. I figured things out. I analyzed a lot of deals.
By the way, that's something to highlight. Jeff got a list of possible properties and he drove every one of them. How many people get a list of properties and drive 0 of them? A lot of people, right? He got in the car and he drove to every property and just checked it out. He didn't know better.
I didn't.
And because he didn't know better, he got the practice. He put in the reps.
You're 100% right. It was driving into neighborhoods I never knew about, and I'm looking at them, and I'm solely basing it upon me just driving by, right? I didn't go in the houses or anything. Just like, oh, this is good. This looks nice. You found an agent. You figured out where you want to invest at. So let's say we found an area of town where we want to invest at, right? We find a house that we kind of like. We think it's going to work. So my next thing I do is I'll try to figure out if the numbers work, right? So you hear everyone say, do the numbers work? Is it a cash flow? Oversimplified, I'm finding out what the price of the house is, right? If it's a $150,000 house, right? Interest rate, oversimplified, is 3%. Whatever the case may be onto it, you figure it out. There's several different websites out there. Bankrate.com. There's several websites that you can figure out what your principal and interest is over a 30-year loan. It's as simple as figuring out what my principal and interest is, right? So it's about $630 or so for a 3% loan on $150,000. You generally put down 20%. So I'm putting down $30,000 of that. So I'm financing $120,000. So $120,000 loan, 3%, $630, right? That's not where it ends. Your next thing you have to do is figure out what your property taxes are in Texas. What I would do is I would go to the county assessor website. I use Montgomery County Assessor website a lot because that's where my properties are at. It tells you what the tax rate is. I could look at the listing on HAR or Zillow or whatever it is onto it, but if I go directly to the county assessor website, I can look to see what the tax rate is and what that house was taxed on in 2020 or 2021, and multiply the tax rate by the price, the tax assessed value of the house. Let's say the house, on that particular one ends up being $3,600 a year, right? So I know my payment is for property taxes is, if it's in my escrow, which means I'm paying it every single month, is $300, right? Now, I don't want to bore everyone with a bunch of numbers, and I know that's probably how it comes off, but I think this part's a little important to realize that you take the $630 plus the $300 in property taxes, right? The next thing you have to figure out is your insurance. When I first started doing this, I would contact my insurance company. I'd give them every single property. They'd give me a quote on that property. What I use now, I know that about a $150,000 house is about $100 a month. I know my premium is about $1,200, right? It may give or take. It might be $1,000. It may be $1,250. Maybe $900. If I use $100, right? And it may be oversimplified, but I can figure something out super quickly. Everyone can add $100. So I take my $600 plus my $300 plus my insurance of $100, and I get $1,030, right? So I know that all in, my payment to the mortgage company is $1,030. Okay, so I know that's what I have to pay. Then I figure out what the rent is in that area, right? I look around at right now what other houses are renting in that neighborhood for about the same square footage or approximately what it is. I look at what has it been sold in the past. You trust on your realtor. This is where your investor realtor has. He's like, look, I think this house is going to rent for $1,550, and based upon XYZ, you come up with $1,550. Simple math. I take $1,550 in revenue coming in, $1,032 going out, and my cash flow is $520. When I first started doing this, anything over $400 was something I was going to move forward with, right? And I know there's a lot of other things involved. I know there's people want you to put aside a certain amount of money for capital expenditures, vacancies. Yes, I guess you could do that. I don't.
When you look at the price of a property and you're trying to estimate the taxes, if you're in Texas, things are different than if you're in some other states. So Jeff is looking at a source of data that's different than Zillow, because you have these group tax rates that are applied on platforms like Zillow. And as of today, it's virtually always wrong. And it's virtually always a little bit lower than it should be, because there are mud taxes, there are a variety of other taxes that in Texas can creep up. So make sure you're looking at a different source, or you might have a different cash flow than you expect.
All right, so I do the math. I do the thing. I like the house. You make an offer. right? And that's where the real estate agent comes in. You'll get more familiar with making an offer is, but basically what you're doing is you're just saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, I'd like to offer you $150,000 for the house. Here's my pre-approval letter. Please take my offer. And then you cross your fingers and you hope.
All right. How do I get my offer accepted? Is there any tactic or strategy that you would employ to ensure that in a stack of offers in a hot market, Jeff's offer is the one that gets taken?
Yeah, I think this is where it gets really tricky, and it has changed a little bit from in the past versus now. I think definitely being approved is important. Sometimes being the first is important to a buyer. You don't know what the buyer's thinking, right? So if you're the first one in and there's 4 offers the same, I've had buyers just take the first one. Well, yeah, they're all the same, but this one was first. I'll go ahead and take that. I mean, it could be as simple as that. We're in a pretty competitive market right now where there's multiple offers. This $150,000 house that I think is fantastic, there may be 4 other people looking at it for $150,000. So then what happens? And then I don't think there's a right or wrong answer at this. I mean, you offer what you feel comfortable with. In a situation like this, at this cash flow, if I ran the numbers at 160,000, right? And at 160,000, it cash flowed $445, right? It's still a good deal, right? So maybe I go in at $160,000. One of my mindsets was, if this house that I'm looking at was priced at 160, would I still have looked at it and would the numbers have made sense? And if the answer to that is still yes, then maybe I go in a little bit higher. I've always kind of felt like I'm not going to let $5,000 or $10,000 over a 30-year period of time stop me from winning. And when I mean winning, I mean getting the house. I think I mentioned this in the very first episode, is that I went $5,000 over the asking price on my very first house and thought it was insane and crazy. And why would I possibly do that? If I would not have done that, I would not be talking to you right now, because I wouldn't have got that first house. I may have felt discouraged. I don't know what would have happened, right? But I got the house, and the house is appreciated fantastic. And it's been a great rental. And the fact that I paid $5,000 is irrelevant. There is no right or wrong answer to make your offer stand out. Some people like to write letters to the buyer or to the seller. I don't know. I mean, maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. I don't see why a seller would care that you have Fluffy as a dog who wants to run the backyard, but I don't know. I win. I got the house. My realtor calls me. He says, Jeff, congratulations. They accepted your offer. After the celebrating and the little happy dance, we have to start figuring things out, right? So the first thing I would do at that point is I get an inspection. There's several inspectors out there. I'm sure there's like a board of inspectors that you can go through, like a Texas. My real estate agent had several inspectors that he had used it in the past. So I contacted them, and they go and do an inspection. And the inspection is basically them going and over every part of the house, right? They make an appointment to go look at everything that happens in the house and tell you what issues there are, if any, and just give you a lot more information. When I walk through the house, I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a roofer. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a plumber. I look at the house. It looks nice. It's pretty colors that stands out, right? So you look for a professional to give you that information, because you have a period of time in between there where you can exit out of the deal based upon what happens on the inspection. I got the inspection. It's scary as hell, right? It's 17 pages long. There's 45 pictures of everything. This house looks like it's going to fall apart, right? It's overwhelming, but don't be scared, right? Talk it over with your real estate agent, right? They've been through it before. A lot of the stuff on there, I mean, the inspectors, I'm not saying that they're not doing, I don't want to get in trouble with any inspector code or anything, but they have guidelines they have to do, right? There's certain, the oven has to fall between this temperature and this temperature, and the water has to be, there's different specific criteria that they have to report on. And so the report ends up being big, right? But you look for the large items. You look for value. You look for issues that are going to happen with the roof, with the air conditioning, the foundation. You look at the big problems. If there's a leaky faucet, and there's a leaky faucet, right? I have a leaky faucet in my house now. What does that, what does that matter? You get it fixed, right? That's not something that's going to stop me from buying the deal. But it is important. You have to get an inspection. Anything to add to the inspection part? I know you've gone through some inspections before. And what was your first one like when you first saw the inspection?
When you look at that first inspection, if you're like most people, terror washes over you. You see tons of things wrong. You see a lot of red lines. You see issues that seem important because everything seems important, and it's hard to know what is or isn't important. This is where your network comes in. This is where your realtor comes in. This is where your meetup group comes in. This is where your ability to vet the issues of the property against people that have seen it all comes in. So leverage it. The inspector, their job is to highlight different issues, and sometimes they'll color code it. So they'll have, these are serious, these are not serious, these are somewhere in between issues. But when it comes down to it, you should talk with people that have already gone through the process. One great example is the asphalt shingles that are common on most roofs out here in Texas. I've seen reports come back that say this roof is shot, and that roof isn't shot. There's still many years left in it. On a 30-year roof, it's down to maybe 3 or 5 years, so it's shot in a relative spectrum. But I've also had an inspection come back where the roof really was done, and then I had somebody verify that. But the report said the same thing, but one of them, I still have the roof on the property, and there hasn't been a single problem with it. And the other one, I got the roof changed out as a condition of buying the property because it legitimately needed to be fixed.
Right, which is the next step I was going to ask you about. What happens after the inspection? Do you do anything? Are there issues that you can bring up to the buyer, to the seller, and say, hey, this XYZ, I wasn't planning on XYZ, and now I have to replace XYZ, and the cost could be this. It turns into a negotiation, maybe? I have it sometimes, yes.
What if I'm afraid that I'm going to blow up the deal? If I come back and say, actually, I want a new roof. Am I going to blow up the deal? Should I be careful about that? Or
maybe. I think it's a start of a negotiation, right? I haven't had one that's just completely walked away. You may. People are individuals, right? So everyone has their own tipping point or their own personality, right? So you may get a buyer who just says, all right, well then see you later. I'll go to the next bid and move on, right? Most of the time it doesn't happen that way. Most of the time they want, they do realize, and the real estate agents both talk and like, all right, well, if this was found here, if you decide to move on and go find another buyer, the other buyer is going to get an inspection, and they're going to get an inspection. And if the roof is bad and the air conditioner is frozen or whatever the case would be onto it, that's not going to change unless either gets fixed or replaced. So it is the beginning of a negotiation. Maybe both sides give a little bit to a certain extent. So it's all negotiable.
This is where also having a good realtor comes in.
100%.
Because they're the one doing the negotiation for you on your behalf. And you can run into issues on both sides, right? You can run into issues if you have somebody that's trying to bowl over the opposing party, and then they get cold feet and back out. Or you get someone that isn't really pushing for your interests. You want somebody that is able to pack a little bit of punch and ask for what you want, and at the same time knows when to back it off a quarter turn and knows how to compromise and meet in the middle and has a whole toolkit of approaches. It makes a big difference.
I've always kind of felt through this process that I would push it more than I would if I was buying my primary house. Okay. So if I'm buying a primary house, like most people are familiar with, once you find that house, you kind of fall in love with it, right? Your wife loves it. The kid loves it. Everyone loves it. And if you push a little bit too hard, you don't want to lose that house, right? Because this is where you're going to live. I'm okay with walking away, right? I'm an investor. I'm looking at this as an investment property. If I don't get it, I live tomorrow. I go look for another house, right? So I can push a little bit harder, I think, on my side and not worry too much about losing the deal. It'll suck if I lose the deal, right? I don't want to lose it. I've already figured it out. I like it. I think it's going to work in my portfolio good. But I'm also okay with it not working out, right? Because there's always going to be another house. So I would feel from an investor standpoint, you could be a little more demanding. You might not get it, but you ain't ever going to get it if you don't ask for it.
You're only out when you say you're out, right? There's going to be another house, and you can just keep swinging. And you can swing and miss, and some you're going to swing and miss maybe and say, shoot. Mm-hmm. Really wanted to get that one. It slipped through my fingers. But there is another house.
Right.
And because you're not moving into it, close counts. If it hits your parameters, if it's the right price, if it's the right area, then it's good enough. And if you're an investor, there's always another house.
There is. I mean, it's weird that I have folders on my computer. When I start the process, I name a folder the address of the house, right? So I'm serious. So I probably got 10, 12 folders of houses that I've done stuff with, gone through, made an offer, the listing of it that I don't own, right? It didn't work out for one reason or another. It just didn't work out. But I have those folders. So when I go to my little folders, I pull up one of my existing houses. I see these old ones, like, oh, I remember that house. Oh yeah, it didn't work out. I asked for too much, or something happened with the appraisal, or whatever. There was some reason why. But it's a reminder that you don't need to hit a home run every time, right? At all. You negotiate. You settle on a price.
The next step is to price out insurance. Insurance on a property can vary based on a number of factors, so it's good to get that done early. One of the things that you want to know is the age of the property, the age of the roof, the age of the HVAC system. And when you look at age of property, there are some factors that come along with age of property. Often the type of plumbing. If the plumbing hasn't been redone and it was built in 1974, you might have galvanized steel plumbing. Galvanized steel is probably corroded by this point and has some issues. It still might work, but it may increase the likelihood of flooding, and insurance may pan you for that if it hasn't been rebuilt with copper or PEX or something later on down the road. For more recent properties, these sorts of issues are less likely to be of concern. Roofing. Roofing is the thing that's going to affect your insurance. If you have a brand new roof, that's a big plus for insurance companies. Why? As you can well imagine, having a roof that can leak can cause a lot of issues. Having a roof that has shingles that are blowing off can have a lot of issues. And if you have a property that's been around a while and the roof hasn't been replaced in a long time, it's going to be something that they're going to look at as a possible risk factor.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen with insurance. That's why I kind of eyeball the $100, but you'll get an exact price when you get in touch with your agent, and they'll know all the information, and then they'll help you out a little bit too in regards to that. So
it also never hurts with insurance to take a look at the various insurance companies. If you have an insurance company that you have your auto with and you have your primary residence with, they might give you a better deal. So it's worth pricing out with your current insurance company for the sake of argument as a baseline. Often that'll be the best. But it's also worth going to an insurance broker, much like it's worth going to a mortgage broker, where you can have somebody who can shop different components of insurance. When it comes to the specifics for insuring a rental property, everybody is different. I can tell you how I do it. I limit the amount of things that are covered in the property as little as possible. I don't really care about insuring the appliances. If the dishwasher gets damaged or the stove gets damaged, I'm going to go online and get a scratch and dent dishwasher and stove for a few $100. They're going to work just fine. They might not be the most pristine. They might not be the best possible match. They might not be the latest possible model, but they're going to be good and they're going to be functional, and I'm going to put it in there. So I don't need $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 in insurance for appliances, fixtures, light fixtures, things like that in the property. The only time I'm going to hit insurance, for the most part, is when there's major serious damage to a property, when it's burned down to the ground, when there's been a giant flood event that somehow has been redirected and taken out the entire property, and I have to take the drywall all the way out. Things like that are the only concern in which I would hit insurance. It's also worth noting, most insurance will not cover floods. And if you're in the market that I'm in, flooding is of real concern. Houston floodplains are something you're going to want to look at, and insurance is definitely going to look at them. If you are in a floodplain, have flood insurance. For myself, my policy is I don't buy in floodplains. I'm not going to live in a floodplain. I'm not going to have an investment property in a floodplain. I'm just not interested in a tropical storm coming through, and then half the houses I have to tear out all the sheetrock. I have to house people. I have to redo flooring. I have to find materials that are going to be in short supply because of the emergency situation. I'm just not interested. I'd rather wait and find another deal.
Right. I agree 100%. I don't insure anything, any contents or anything inside whatsoever. There's nothing inside that I insure. and I don't do anything flood also, but that would be something important to do in those upper steps that we passed, is that when you are evaluating, know if it's in a flood zone. That might be a part where you do contact your insurance agent before you make the offer on the house, because that will make a difference in your cash flow if you're paying an extra $125, $150 a month in flood insurance. And it may change your mind on buying the house like it would mine and it would yours.
So the next step is going through underwriting. You have a property, you've put in an offer, the offer has been accepted, you've put down some earnest money, you may have put down money for an option period. Earnest money is the money you put down to secure the property, saying that you are in earnest looking to buy it. And an option period in Texas is money that you put down where you have the ability to back out from a deal no matter what. And it says, I'm going to pay you money for the chance to look at this home before my earnest money is locked up and I'm going to lose the earnest money if I don't move forward. So you have the lender. The lender is taking the loan. You submit your financials. You submit the details of the loan. You submit the inspection report. You submit the appraisal, or an appraisal is called for your property. And this whole package of documentation lands on the desk of somebody called an underwriter. And an underwriter's job is to crush hopes and dreams.
They're trying to find errors, like an auditor to the 10th.
Their job is to find reasons to decline your loan or find problems with it that they need additional documentation for. And much like appraisers that can run a wide range in quality and wide range in price that comes back for your property, underwriters can be very different. By way of example, I've been buying 2 properties at the same time through the same lender, and I got different underwriters, and the properties were very similar. And one of them had 4 or 5 conditions that were easy to match, and the other one had just an absolute litany of things, some of which didn't make any sense. The goal with conditions for underwriting is to accurately give the underwriter the information that they're requesting. The underwriter has the task of going through that. And you can find great underwriters that do a good job, and you can find folks that are a little bit more complicated or that enjoy throwing up roadblocks. Make sure that you build in time for that to occur, because it might be a streamlined process where you're in and out. It might take a while, and just be prepared that you might have to provide an extra pay stub. You might have to provide new bank statements. You might have to sign a letter of explanation saying that you have access to the funds in that 401k at some percentage. You might have to sign a letter of explanation saying that you are in fact going to rent out this property and it is going to be an investment property.
Now it's over. We did all that. We jumped through all the hoops and we close on the house. We're done. We own the house. I think now is the scary part for everyone else, right? What do you do now? Because now you turn into a possible landlord, right? And that's what scares everybody, right? Everything's going to break. I don't know how to find a tenant. They're going to destroy my house. They're going to call me every hour of the night, right? So this is when the scary part could happen for you. Everyone has a different tipping point where something bothers them. So depending on the condition of the house, it may be ready. You may have bought the house and it's done. There's nothing else to do on it. You may have bought the house knowing that when I buy this, I'm going to put in new carpet, or I'm going to put in new floors, or I'm going to paint the bedroom here. Whatever you need to do is part of the strategy that you and your real estate agent would have to discuss. And that would be kind of one of your strategies up top when you decide what kind of property you're going to buy. You know, if you buy it, you know, let's say we bought this house and it's ready to go, right? It's turnkey, what they call it. You know, you can close the door and turn the key and it's done. You open it back up again and it's ready. So let's say either you fixed it all up or it's ready to go. What happens now? I mean, how do we get a tenant into our place? Your real estate agent, right? There he is again, your real estate agent. I use the same real estate agent and he listed the house, right? He listed the house and it's just like you're selling a house, right? You're listing it. You know, you don't live there, so you don't have to go to McDonald's or go to Sonic and get a smoothie or anything else while someone's looking at your house each day. You have to keep moving in and out because your house is empty. So they can go look at your house at any time.
Now, let's say you have an application. The application rolls in. Your agent says, hey, this person really wants to, this is Joe and John Smith. They want to move into the property. How do you know that they're worth having in your property?
So most agents know that as far as are expecting to get some paycheck stubs from the customer, from the tenant, and also some picture IDs. So then they send that information to you and say, all right, this is their job. So you can look at it quickly and say, all right, well, do they have enough income? Do they have jobs? And then what I do is, if I decide on that, I want to move forward with the application process, I use a website called Smart Move, which is by TransUnion, and it's a background check.
And we'll throw the notes for my Smart Move in the description, and you can use the link down there.
Yeah, and so it's simply, as much as I have their email address, I send the email to the potential tenant. They pay, I believe it's $45, which is what I call my application fee, which is what I have on the listing for the property as an application fee. So they pay for that. They enter their information in, and then after they enter their information in, I get a background check. I get their credit report. I get their reported income. I get if they have a criminal history, if they have any landlord or rental history. So it's a brief background of who this person is. Can they afford to make the payment? That's what I've been using as a basis to start the process if I'm going to approve them or not.
Do they have to have perfect credit?
Nope. They don't have to have perfect credit. Everyone has a different story, right? And so I personally, I don't know who else does this, but I personally contact the previous landlord. If it's an apartment complex, if it's a person, whoever it is, I'm just calling and verifying residency, right? I mean, I used to work in the furniture rental business for 20 years, and I was familiar with verifying people's income and their residency, right? So I would do that. I would call the resident. I created a form letter I send to an apartment complex that asks how many times they've paid on time, how many times they've been late, have there been any issues, did they get their security deposit back? I want to know who this person is as far as a rental person. They may have had some issues on their credit. It doesn't exclude them from getting anything. It doesn't have it be the end. I also, if I'm ready to move forward, I'll call them. I've had conversations with every one of my tenants, and I don't know if that's common. I don't know if it's not. It's just something that I like to do. I like to call them and introduce who I am, ask them if they have any questions about the property. They may have some questions, which opens up some dialogue for me to ask them some questions also. Hey, I noticed here that, you had XYZ on your credit, but, can you explain that for me? Or, hey, you were at this apartment complex for 9 months. Is there a reason why you're looking to move? Why do you want to move here? I can ask questions. I'm not a conglomerate where I have 500 properties. I'm just a property manager, and I'm just approving or disapproving. It's a personal aspect. I feel like I'm going to be working with this tenant for hopefully 4, 5, 6, 10 years, right? So I'm building a rapport with them right off the bat. I'm as much selling my property to them as they're selling themselves to me. I want them to know I'm hands-on, and I'm there to listen to what they have to say, and then I make a decision.
It doesn't mean that they have 700 credit score. As a matter of fact, a lot of the folks that are renting properties are not going to have perfect credit. They're going to have issues in their background almost always. Not in all cases, but often people are renting because something has happened in life or the circumstance have made it so they're not sitting on a bunch of cash and they're ready to buy a property. They're instead renting a home. And one of those reasons can be that they have issues in their credit history and things that have gone wrong. One of the things that I always want to look at is making sure that they don't have a bunch of open collections and things that are continuously late. If they're missing their car payment, if they're missing their credit card, and they're doing it not in the last 5 years, but they're doing it this month, wait a second. For me, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that show up on people's credit. There's, medical bills, things that are out of people's immediate control. But yeah, if I look to see that their car payment, if they've had a car payment for 2 years and they're on time every single year, but they had 3 charge-offs 4 years ago to a utility company and a hospital bill, I know this person's on the right track. I know they're trying. They need a car. They need a place to live, right? I've already checked to see that they're good on their apartment, and now I see that they got 2 cars and they've been current on it for nonstop. They're not charging up 15 credit cards. They're not in debt, way above and beyond their means to be able to pay me. So there are different things you look at the credit where you're trying to build a story is what you're kind of doing. You're kind of looking at the big picture and trying to figure out this person and whether they're going to pay you or not.
If you can't get in touch with a previous employer or a current employer, If you can't get in touch with any employer, red flag, no pass for me. If you can't get in touch with a current landlord and or a previous landlord, but definitely their current landlord, if you can't get in touch with somebody, again, pass.
Right. What would be the reason why they don't want you to let you talk to their landlord? Is there, they should be proud of what they've done with their previous landlord, where they want to give it to you if they're looking to rent your house. So you found a tenant. Now what? What do?
You give them the keys.
Give them the keys, and you go to the mailbox and you collect your checks. Simple, right?
It's worth noting that it's good to set up an automatic payment system of some kind. In the year 2021 that we're in right now, a lot of these things can be automated. My goal, because I'm heavy in the visionary side of things, I like to start up projects. I like to run into the next thing, tracking down the details, following up with 11 things. If I don't have a system in place to capture that, I just know things will fall through the cracks. And so having automatic pays with tenants through a system of some kind, if a payment is missed, a late fee is applied automatically, where these things are handled for me and they're given a system of notifications and a system of follow-up. That is the ideal for me. It's easy to do. You can do that cheaply now. There's a number of services online. Currently, I'm using the apartments.com service. There may be others. There may be better ones, but that's the one I'm using currently, and it's been fine.
Yeah, it's been fine. I've used the same one each time, so I can add charges if I need to. It automatically does. I can input when late charges occur. I get notified of the status throughout the process, where I get notified the whole step where the tenant makes the payment. They've set it up. When I'm going to get it to my bank, I go through the whole process. It's very simple.
So when it comes down to dealing with a tenant that's in your property, you can either self-manage the property or you can have a management company or someone else manage the property for you. In my case, I self-manage my properties. I don't have that many properties to manage, so at scale that I'm dealing with, it's reasonable. If I had 100, 150, whatever it might be, sure, then your phone is lit up all the time and sort of defeats the point. But if you get the right people in there, I just have people text me. I love text for a couple of reasons. One, it creates a paper trail. So I know when a message was received. I have documentation of everything that went back and forth. It holds them accountable. It also holds me accountable. So they know that they've sent me a request and I said I was going to handle it. And if for some reason it were to fall through the cracks, they can say, hey, last Tuesday I told you a thing. Now, for myself, that gives me a great framework where then text message comes in, text message goes out to contractor. Hey, the sink's backed up. Great. Message goes out to plumber. The sink is backed up. The plumber goes in. I get the bill. 2 text messages were sent. No brain fade on my part.
Right. And I think that's the part that scares everybody. And I think that the age we're in now, it's all done through your phone. You don't have to, you're not going and I'm not going to fix the toilet. I'm not waking up at 11 o'clock at night or going anywhere. It's all done through a text message. And just like you said, you're basically a middleman if you think about it. They tell you what's wrong. You tell someone else what's wrong. That person goes back to number one. It gets fixed. If there's an issue, they'll call you about it. If not, they'll fix it. The end.
Jeff, so how do you think about the expenses that are involved in repairing a property? Is there any chance that it eats up all your cash flow?
Yeah, I mean, I guess realistically, if you have one house and you have $400 a month cash payment, cash flow each month, and in month number 2, your air conditioner goes out and you have to spend $5,000, yes, you're in the hole. Could that happen? 100%. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I like to, and this is all negotiation, ask for a home warranty for the first year when I'm purchasing a house. Maybe nowadays people aren't asking for it. Maybe it's something that differentiates your deal. But in most of my properties I've got at least a 1-year home warranty, which will cover the air conditioner. It'll cover something that happens right off the bat. In other words, so if I buy a house and the air conditioner goes wrong in 3 months, I have a coverage for it. But yeah, there's always things that possibly could happen. And I think that, just like in your regular life, once you have all your finances in place, you should have some sort of an emergency fund. You should have 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of emergency funds saved up in case something happens, right? I mean, that needs to happen normally. I did the same thing for the rental properties. Now, the rental property number 1, in my mind, I had my emergency fund for my own personal house, for my own personal life. I used that as my emergency fund for if something went wrong with the rental property. But as you buy houses and you start to get more cash flow, then I keep a certain amount of money in that bank, even if, each month you're making cash flow, right? And what I've done is that each month you build up, if you're bringing in $2,000 a month and then $2,500 a month and then $3,000, over a period of time that adds up. And then you use that money along with your other money to buy the next house. So the kind of snowball effect, the compounding of it. But I always keep X amount of money in the account where I won't use to buy the next house for emergencies. It's my emergency fund of what happens. And that's why I don't account for capital expenses. That's why I don't account for vacancies. That's why I don't put all that in there, because I have a built-in safety net.
A tip to give to someone just starting out is, if you're going to buy a property and you're going to make, say, $400 or $500 a month in cash flow, not accounting for expenses, and you don't have the money set aside where if you were need to replace an air conditioner or replace part of a roof in short order or rebuild a fence that gets blown down during a storm, then maybe pump the brakes. If you don't have the money to weather that storm, then you're not ready yet.
Correct.
And you want to have at least enough money where you're not in some sort of bind if a one-off scenario comes up, because these things can happen. And you don't want to be in a position where you're running up your credit cards or you're borrowing money or you're having a difficult, bad experience right off the bat. You want to make sure that you're taking the first step from a place of security.
Yeah. I mean, I think I told you this story, is that I bought my first house. There was a lot of back and forth in my head. Should I buy it? What do I do? I would listen to all these podcasts, and I would sit across the street at my neighbor's house and we'd sit in the garage and I'd bounce things off his head and we'd go back and forth. And I guess what it came down to when I was ready to do it is I was like, look, if worst case scenario, I buy this house and no one rents it, right? Can I make the payment without it costing my family not being able to eat? Is it going to cost my family and not being able to live where I live? Can I weather that storm if someone doesn't rent the house? As soon as the answer was yes, then I was ready to go. I felt comfortable. I felt like I had a security net if I failed, right? If I failed, I could weather the storm. And I think that's super important. I think that's why it's number one. Make sure your personal finances are in order. If you don't have that, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. Could you get lucky? I mean, I didn't have no really major expenses the first 3, 4, 5. I really haven't had any major expenses, right? So I can't think that's going to be common. I mean, I don't want to guess or hope or that I'm going to go into a situation. I think that's going to set yourself up for failure. You got to be prepared for the what ifs. And don't be discouraged if something happens right off the bat and you have to go into it, right? You have to replace an air conditioner, right? Yes, you replace an air conditioner, right? But you plan on holding that house for a long period of time. And now you have a new air conditioner that's going to last you 20, 30 years, right? So you're not going to have to worry about that for much longer. If you do want to sell your house down the road in 5 years, right? A 5-year-old AC looks more attractive to a buyer than a 20-year-old AC, right?
All right. So if you're looking to get started and you want a synopsis of what we just went over, check out in the notes below. We have a list of each step that we broke this down into. 16 steps in buying a new property and getting it ready to list and getting it on the market. It's a little wordy.
Join us next time for another episode of the Texas Real Estate Podcast, your source for everything Texas real estate.